I am currently fantasizing about stats. This time we got the fairy type, a type that is good both on offense and defense, that was created to be a dragon killer. So here we go, 50 useless fairy type stats. As usual, only the regular and regional forms will be in the count, not alternatives or megas, unless stated otherwise. Let's just start. The fairy type on average has the lowest attack amongst all Pokemon types. The fairy type is the most recent type added to the franchise. Unova and Sinnoh are tied for releasing the least amount of fairy types with only 2. Kalos released the most amount of fairy types at 13, doing this while being the smallest region. 3 fairy types allocate 30% or more of all their stat to HP. All 3 came from the same evolution line. The top 7 HP allocation amongst all fairy types came before the fairy type even existed. Galarian, Weezing, Sylveon, Galarian Rapidash, and Hatterene are the only Pokemon to gain the fairy typing upon evolution. There's a 2-way tie for having the highest attack allocation amongst all fairy type Pokemon. Both came from the same evolution line. Xerneas is both the tallest and heaviest fairy type. Flabébé is the smallest and lightest fairy type Pokemon. Only Enamorus and Iron Valiant has all their offensive value at 100 or higher. The largest gap between bulk and offense score by fairy type Pokemon is 200, done by Carbink. Carbink and Diancie are tied for the highest bulk at 350. Iron Valiant has the highest offense amongst all fairy types at 366. Azurill has the lowest offense of all fairy types at 60. 3 of the 4 lowest defense allocation are from the same evolution line. These 3 are also a part of the 4 lowest special defense allocation of a fairy type Pokemon. 2 fairy types allocate 25% or more of all their stat to speed. Both of them came from the same evolution line. The most common fairy type combination is Fairy and Psychic, with a total of 9 Pokemon having this typing. The most common base stat for fairy type is 570, which happened a total of 6 times, and all of them came from either Alola or Paldea. 37 fairy types with over 60 HP, none came from the Unova region. 42 fairy types with over 50 speed, none came from the Johto region. 3 fairy types Pokemon with a special defense score of 150 or higher. All 3 came from the Kalos region. Fluttermane has the highest sum of his best 3 stats of all fairy types with 405. Ralts has the lowest sum of his best 3 stats with a total of 120. Ralts also has the lowest bulk of all fairy types with a score of 88, and is the only fairy type to not hit triple digit. I halfway done, just letting you guys know my favorite fairy type Pokemon is Tapu Fini. I never even played Sun and Moon, I just like its design. Combining a Pokemon's worst 3 stats together, Xerneas has the highest sum at 388. Combining a Pokemon's worst 3 stats together, Igglybuff has the lowest sum at 50. These are the average stats amongst all fairy types, rounded to the nearest ones. Only Slurpuff is within 20 points of each of the averages. Likewise, only Ralts isn't within 24 points of any of the averages. The average base stat amongst fairy type is 430. Dedenne is the closest to this amount with 431. Fluttermane has the highest attack gap of all fairy types with 80. Florges has the largest defense gap of all fairy type at 86. If special stats were removed, Ralts and Cleffa would be tied with the lowest base stat of 118. If physical stats were removed, Azurill would have the lowest base stat of 130. If special stats were removed, Zacian would have the highest base stat at 465. If physical stats were removed, Fluttermane would have the highest base stat at 460. All fairy type Pokemon that were released in the Unova region ranks in the top 5 for speed allocation by a fairy type. Zacian is the best fairy type physical sweeper with a score of 258. Fluttermane is the best fairy type special sweeper and special tank. Diancie is the best fairy type physical tank with a score of 250. Out of all fairy types, Azurill is the worst physical sweeper, special sweeper, and special tank. 4 fairy type Pokemon allocate less than 39% of all their stat to their best 2 stat categories. All 4 of these Pokemon came from the Kalos region. These are the top 10 Pokemon by special attack allocation of all fairy types. 6 of them are paired up with a psychic type. There are 21 mono fairy type Pokemon. 9 of them came from the Kalos region. Despite less than 1/3 of all fairy type being monotype, the top 2 highest base stat of all fairy types are monotyped. 6 fairy type Pokemon has equalized bulk and offense scores. These 6 Pokemon are split evenly into Mono Fairy, Fairy Steel, and Fairy Psychic. All Creamy is the only mono fairy type Pokemon in the top 15 of special attack allocation by a fairy type. There are more dual type Fairy Psychic, Fairy Grass, Fairy Steel, and Fairy Water type Pokemon than there are a fairy and the other 13 Pokemon type combined. These are the average stat allocations amongst all fairy types. Only Swirlix and Milcery are within 3.3 percentage points of each of the averages. Likewise, Fluttermane and Carbink aren't within 4 percentage points of any of the averages. If the threshold is increased to 5%, only Carbink remains. Yeah, those are 50 useless stats about the fairy types. This might be the final useless stat video, I don't know. And yeah, that's about it.